Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. As Capitol Hill is poised to pass yet another spending bill, Americans, I think, are a little bit confused. Is this an omnibus, a couple of minibuses, the short bus? We don't really know. So Representative Chip Roy, who has been an advocate for actually making a difference on Capitol Hill, using the power of the purse to restrain a lot of the reckless spending that Congress is so famous for, has, with a few of his colleagues, objected to what he has described as basically an omnibus that has been broken into two of the minibuses that will be passed potentially by Congress in a spending package that really gives a lot of the funding to some of these leftist organizations and some of these places that not only does America not have the money for, but we should not be funding. So Representative Roy joins me on radio this morning. Here's what he had to say.
Well, good morning, Jenna. Good to be with you. And yeah, I mean, we're back at it again in the swamp, spending other people's money and racking up $1 trillion of debt every 100 days. And this is where I just fundamentally disagree with my Republican colleagues, and the ones that are making the decision to proceed and allow the Democrats to essentially control the shots. We've been passing legislation with way more Democrat votes than Republican votes. This is where I think the Speaker and some of my Republican colleagues should do something different. I think we should lead. I think we should do what the American people sent us here to do, limit spending and fight for the policy victories. We're going to this week move a bill that will be the second half of a large omnibus that was just divided into two. That if I'm going to give a little credit, it does build on the work we started last year, which was to change the town, pass appropriations bills, get Republican input with amendments. But it leaves most of that on the cutting room floor, and instead will spend more than Nancy Pelosi's spending levels. That's true. It will largely leave non-defense spending flat. That is, leave it at Pelosi's levels. There's a few cuts here and a few increases there. It will continue to fund the World Health Organization for the most part. And again, I don't have the text yet, and we're supposed to vote on it in 2 days. That's another problem. But I think it'll fund the World Health Organization. I think it'll fund the United Nations. It might pull back on UNRWA funding, which is money to Gaza, but we're not sure yet and haven't seen it. It will continue to fund wide open borders. It will not hold the DHS accountable. I think it's going to give them more money for ICE beds and Border Patrol agents, but they'll just use that to keep processing more people because they don't even use ICE enforcement. It will continue transgender surgeries. It will continue abortion tourism. It will continue diversity and equity inclusion at the Department of Defense. It will continue to fund all manners of sins in the Office of Refugee Resettlement at HHS. It will continue to fund, for example, abortion research, that is research and, quote, fetal research, which is being used for the ridiculous things that we've learned about, like the DC-5 and other stuff. All of this is stuff that Republicans should be fighting harder and be willing to use the power of the purse to stop. So I'm going to fight it, and I hope more of my Republicans will oppose it than support it.
Yeah, all of these things that you're describing, Representative Roy, sound really bad and not conservative. And so why is it that this always has to be a package? I mean, I thought that Speaker Johnson, one of the main things that he was an advocate for was doing things kind of issue by issue. But when you have this type of a big omnibus, even if it's split into two, all of this stuff does not sound like it's a good thing to fund. So why can't we do something better than just some minimal increases when we're getting all of this other trash along with it?
Well, if I were going to make the arguments that I think the Speaker is making, and look, he's a friend and he's a good man. I think he would say that he, was dealt a short straw and didn't have enough time to get this all on track, and he's got a razor-thin majority, and it's difficult in divided government. Okay, it's all true that it's difficult. We have a thin majority, but we had a thin majority last year when we passed H.R. 2. We had a thin majority when we passed Limit, Save, Grow, which legitimately cut spending. And we had a thin majority when we cut a defense authorization bill that dealt with the abortion tourism and all that stuff. When we passed 7 appropriations bills and had 3 more pass forward to the floor. So the bottom line is this. There's a disease in this town, which says, well, we can't get that done because, Chip, we have divided government. And so you just have to understand. And, we've got to fund government. Shutdowns kill us, all that stuff. By the way, this idea that shutdowns kill us or that you got to back away from leveraging the power of the purse because you're afraid of a shutdown isn't backed up by history. Right? When we had a fight with Senator Ted Cruz in 2013, a righteous fight that was proper to try to stop Obamacare, we eventually caved. We should have kept fighting so we could try to save us from the abomination that is Obamacare. We won a lot of seats the next year. We did. And everybody said, oh, we'll get killed. No, they want to see people that are willing to fight. Right? When President Trump fought in 2019, we actually still did okay in 2020. We didn't, I think we gained a few seats. They always act like it'll be cataclysmic. The American people don't view it that way. And this whole idea that we've got to go win seats and majority makers, you got to do everything you can, make that all more expensive and more difficult and less likely to succeed when we just try to do that rather than leading with a vision that will get the American people to rally behind us that, oh, these Republicans are serious and they're fighting for me. Last point I would make is I think the leadership class, the appropriators, the hawks, they get hung up on, the details of this town rather than a vision that we can rally around. And so, for example, it's like, well, Chip, we can't do this or we won't have money for defense. Well, guys, if we don't change the woke culture at the Pentagon, then more money at the Pentagon isn't going to save our country from its assault. We've got to restore who we are as Americans. You got to stand up on that rock and get people to want to stand up and defend this country. You can't just use the Pentagon as an excuse, as they do, to pass all manners of sins.
So this is what I love about Congressman Chip Roy is that he gets this. He gets what it means to genuinely be a conservative, even on Capitol Hill. He's absolutely right that this kind of just, compromise and laying down for whatever the Democrats want to fund isn't really standing firm on conservative values. And he's also right that, of course, this kind of practical reality and living in practical reality means that you do have to have incremental change. But that doesn't mean that you just fund the government however the Democrats want. And yet when they're the ones in the majority, they never give Republicans anything that we want. They always say, we're in the majority. We can do whatever we want, get on board or vote whatever way you want to, but we don't really care. Why don't Republicans stand firm? This is our opportunity as constituents to make a difference. Call your member of Congress. Tell them what you think. Tell Speaker Johnson's office what you think about refunding the WHO, about all of this for abortion. I mean, all of these things that are not conservative values. And also tell Congressman Chip Roy and Thomas Massie and some of those others that are voting against that you appreciate them standing up firmly on Capitol Hill. They're doing the job that we, the American people, sent them to do. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. With the new shakeup in the RNC's leadership, with co-chairs Michael Whatley and Lara Trump, the RNC is also taking a little bit of a different direction. This coming from the Washington Examiner. Lara Trump promises legal ballot harvesting to be part of new RNC strategy. Newly elected Republican National Committee co-chair Lara Trump said it is time for the RNC to step up its game and compete with more strategy against the Democrats. We've been playing checkers and the Democrats have been playing chess, Trump told the Washington Examiner. Hogan Gidley, who is a former deputy press secretary for the Trump administration and also the current co-chair of the Center for Election Integrity at the America First Policy Institute, joins me now. So, Hogan, my perspective on this, and of course, you and I dealt with this in the Trump 2020 campaign when the campaign at that point was very against ballot harvesting. I think rightly, Dinesh D'Souza and Hans von Sparovsky from Heritage, some of our colleagues on election integrity, have rightly called ballot harvesting ballot trafficking. And yet, while we still combat some of these rules on the ground in various states, we have to play by the rules as they currently are. So I think this is actually a good move for the RNC. But what say you?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, you can't fight with arms tied behind your back. And I think the Republican Party has done that now for several election cycles. And I would liken it to a football game. It would be like me saying, in order to score points when you play football, you can do that by passing the ball, running the ball, or kicking the ball. And our side just says, oh, that's great. I'm glad those are the rules of the game. But we think that passing the ball and running the ball are immoral, so we're just going to kick it. That's fine, but you're going to lose a lot of football games. You have to utilize all of the tools on the ground to not just, message to people, but to get people to the polls and get folks voting for you any way you can do that. Now, I would argue, as you just said, there was a key word in that setup. Legal ballot harvesting is important. Making sure we have people who go out there and do it the right way, according to the laws by the states. You can't find somebody with hundreds of ballots in their car, thousands of boxes of ballots somewhere else. This is about making sure the right people go out and do the right kind of ballot harvesting. That's how you're going to help effectuate some change in the outcome of these elections. Because as you mentioned, and as Lara rightly said, the left has been doing this for a long time. We used to be pretty good at it, but the RNC did end their ballot chase program. They weren't focused a lot on ballot harvesting, and that was a problem, and it showed at the ballot box. We have to utilize all of the tools, all of the rules in place so that we can get some stuff done.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And I think that you're right to draw attention to that very key word, which is legal ballot harvesting. Of course, we are not suggesting, and I don't think the RNC is suggesting, that anyone go and ignore the rules or do anything nefarious like some of the things that we saw were alleged in the 2020 election. And certainly we can still advocate for change. So, for example, my former home state and many other states have universal vote by mail. I don't think that's a great idea. I don't think it's great that we can't track ballots, and once you open them and you remove the ballot from the envelope, and there are a lot of problems with that in terms of auditing and the audit trail and some of those things. But while we are trying to implement change, we still have to, as you mentioned, play by the rules. And so how do you message this, and how is AFPI messaging this to conservatives that are still concerned about the 2020 election? They don't want ballot harvesting, but at the same time, now they're seeing these headlines, oh yeah, the RNC is going to go out and ballot harvest, and they're a little bit upset.
Well, a lot of that comes from the top, right? If the eventual nominee or the nominee, President Trump, and the RNC begin to push that down on folks. Look, there are a lot of polling there is a lot of polling out there that we've done and we've seen about certain election integrity measures. I mean, 85% of the people in this country want photo identification requirements in order to vote. Now, notice I didn't say voter ID. You can't get on a plane with an electric bill. They want photo identification to vote. 84% want to make ballot harvesting illegal, right? Not curtail it, make it illegal. Okay, those are big numbers. 82% want ballots returned to election officials by election day. It's not election week, it's not election month. So these poll numbers really indicate that's what people want. I would submit to you, though, in this particular instance, if we beat the left at their game, they will want to change the rules. For example, in Pennsylvania, we were fighting people there at the state legislative level who wanted to keep Zuckerbucks as an actual thing. Our side said no. In the testimony before I believe the House committee, someone said, well, what if the Koch brothers came in and did the same thing, but on the Republican side? And the Democrats were like, yeah, you're right. Maybe we should end Zuckerbucks. Same thing applies to Facebook. Think about it in terms of Obama back in 2012, I guess it was, when he utilized Facebook in a way that no candidate had ever done before. What did the left say? amazing. How innovative for someone so young and youthful and cool and hip to come out here and use a social media platform to get folks to the polls. That's amazing. Then Donald Trump comes along, Cambridge Analytica in 2016, and outdoes Hillary Clinton. And what's the response from the left? We should probably censor Facebook, right? If we do better at ballot harvesting, if we do better at ballot chasing, I guarantee you the left is going to jump up and go, wait a minute, we should stop all of this, because if we beat them at their game, they're going to realize they have to use other tactics to try and win elections because we've done better than they have in a particular cycle. So look for that to change as well.
That is a really great point, Hogan Gidley, that if we actually do better than the Democrats, then they're going to want to change the rules. It's the same thing that they're looking at with the Electoral College. When they see that for the last several election cycles, the popular vote has been the better metric rather than the Electoral College. And so they want to substantively change an important constitutional provision just to advantage their own side. And as I always say, if the Democrats didn't have double standards, and they wouldn't have standards at all. And we can definitely presume that the Democrats are always going to try to tip the rules in their favor, where I think conservatives just want to play by the rules. And sometimes that does put us at a disadvantage. So in just about the last minute I have with you, what is AFPI specifically and your election integrity group focusing on heading into 2024?
Well, one quick point, too. The Supreme Court is another example. The left was fine with the Supreme Court until they started losing cases. Now they want to abolish it and just stack it with like 25 people to change the outcomes 100%. Of those rulings. Listen, at AFPI, we are focused on protecting legal votes and legal voters. In a lot of ways, as you know, Jenna, doing that takes going granular to the local level, because the Constitution is clear. State legislatures are responsible for deciding the time, manner, and place of elections. But it's not just passing laws, which we've helped do in about 35 states. It's making sure those laws are followed. And when people don't, whether through maliciousness, ignorance, stupidity, or laziness, they get held accountable one way or the other, either with the ballot box or actually going to jail for breaking the law. So we're trying to remind the legislatures, you've done some good work, but the governors out there can't go rogue. You can't allow secretaries of state or attorneys general to just make up laws in real time. They have to follow the laws on the books. So we've been doing that as well. And lawfare. Great. Keep in mind.
We gotta leave it there. But Hogan Gidley, really appreciate your analysis. We'll be right back with more. As you know, my friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of their life. He didn't stop by simply creating the best pillow. Mike created the Giza Dream bed sheets. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for me, which is crucial for my busy schedule. Mike found the world's best cotton. It is ultra soft and breathable, but extremely durable. Mike's Giza sheets come with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. The Giza Dream Sheets come in a variety of sizes and colors. Mike's latest incredible deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you will receive 50% off the Giza Dream Sheets. You will also receive a set for as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com, click on the radio podcast square, and use the promo code Jenna. There you will find not only this amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow 2.0 mattress topper, which I have and I love, the MyPillow kitchen towel sets, and now even flannel sheets and so much more. We definitely need flannel sheets for as crazy as all of this weather has been lately. So go to mypillow.com and make sure you use the promo code Jenna or call 1-800-564-8475. That's 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna. Former Trump White House trade advisor Peter Navarro has reported to prison for his 4-month sentence after being found guilty at trial for contempt of Congress. This, of course, coming in the wake of a January 6th subpoena that he did not comply with. This is what former President Trump had to say yesterday when asked by a reporter his response.
Mr. President, do you think the Supreme Court should have kept Peter Navarro out of prison?
I think it's a shame. I think it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace to our nation what they did to him.
He He's saying it is a disgrace. It's a disgrace what happened to him and what they're doing to our nation. So we need to talk about Peter Navarro, because I know a lot of people who are watching this program have very strong feelings politically one way or another, and everyone is entitled to their political opinions, but we have to separate politics from the legal. So we need to go back and actually set out what happened here in Peter Navarro's case. What happened was that the January 6th committee, which everyone understands as having been compromised and comprised against House rules, they didn't allow for the minority party, then the Republican Party at the time under Speaker Pelosi, to put the Republican of their choosing on the committee. That violated House rules. Everybody understands that. There was a lot of different controversy and comment over that, but they went ahead and issued on face congressional subpoenas that are presumptively valid under the law. So in order to get a subpoena that is deemed invalid, you have to challenge that in court by a competent judicial arbiter. So Peter Navarro gets one of these subpoenas. I got a January 6th subpoena. A lot of people did, right? And so he gets a subpoena, and instead of challenging it in court or by a competent arbiter, he simply ignores it. And he simply responds by a letter himself, not even through a lawyer, but by himself. He responds to the committee and says, I don't think this is valid. I'm asserting executive privilege. I'm not going to comply. So he simply refused. Then the House, after coming back and saying, no, we want you to come and sit in the chair and offer testimony, then the House, by a vote, held him in contempt and referred him to the DOJ. The DOJ then decided to act on that and actually brought charges against Peter Navarro, who elected, rather than negotiating some kind of plea agreement, went forward to trial. And he asserted his defenses, which were executive privilege and other things. The jury didn't buy it. They ended up convicting him at trial. He is now appealing, but the Supreme Court declined to stay his prison sentence, like most instances, while the appeal is pending, because there really isn't a genuine legal basis that the court believes that Navarro's appeal can rest on. This is all legal rather than political. So here's my concern with this. While everybody, I think, is very frustrated with all of the lawfare and the targeting, and everybody's saying, well, what about Eric Holder? I mean, he declined a congressional subpoena. He wasn't held in contempt of Congress. Well, yeah, he should have been. He should have been prosecuted for the same thing. The answer here is to call out the Democrats and their hypocrisy, not suggesting that everybody, when they receive a congressional subpoena, can just decide for themselves and self-determine whether or not they're going to comply with it. That's anarchy. That is suggesting to the American people that if we have a subpoena that is by the opposition or a political party, or we just don't prefer to comply with it, that we can then go ahead and just say, nah, I don't want to sit in the chair. And that should be okay with the DOJ and with justice. That really isn't. So I actually don't really feel bad here for Peter Navarro, because what he should have done is gone to court and challenged it. My guess is that he didn't challenge this because other people who had already received January 6 subpoenas had challenged it in court on the basis of the committee being comprised against House rules. And the court said, and rightly so, that's not their purview. It's called a non-justiciable issue in legal parlance. What that means is that the court doesn't actually have jurisdiction to have the House enforce its own rules. It's the same thing that the Constitution provides in Article 1 that says that the House can determine on what basis to expel or discipline its own members. The court is not going to come into somebody's regular home, and if a child, thank God, can decide, I want to go to court and say, I don't like what time my curfew is, and I'm going to take my parents to court. The court will say, well, sorry, there's no statutory authority. There's nothing here by a basis that we can legally have a legal remedy or a court of justice or equity remedy here. It's the same thing here with non-justiciable issues. The House can determine for itself. Now, if it's something like, for example, Representative Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene took Nancy Pelosi to court, and you'll remember this, when she tried in the midst of COVID, she made this House rule that they have to wear masks, and they decided to not comply with that. And she tried to say, well, the fine is going to come out of your salary. That's actually a constitutional provision that a member of Congress, their salary can't be changed during the term and the sitting Congress. That's a constitutional provision. So the court can adjudicate that. They can look to the Constitution because that is substantive constitutional law. But here, for those subpoenas, it's up to the House to self-determine whether or not the committee was comprised according to its rules or not. It's a non-justiciable issue. So the court said, sorry, these subpoenas are presumptively valid. But the point here is that Navarro didn't even try. He just simply rejected it and said, I'm asserting executive privilege and I'm just not complying at all. That is genuinely lawless. So if we as conservatives are supposed to be the party of the rule of law and holding everyone accountable and making sure that Democrats play by the same rules, the answer here is not that Peter Navarro should not have been convicted. The answer is that Eric Holder should have been convicted. He should have been held in contempt of Congress. He should have been forced to stand at trial or to negotiate a plea agreement or actually go and comply with the subpoena. The response here is not that conservatives can reject Democrat subpoenas or that Republicans can reject Democrat subpoenas or Democrats can reject Republican subpoenas. That ends in utter chaos. So we have to be advocates for the rule of law. And I get why everyone is saying that the Democrats are throwing the book at Republicans and we feel bad for Peter Navarro. Yeah, I feel bad for him, but I feel bad that he didn't really get competent legal counsel. And I've had a lot of response on social media since I've posted this over the last 24 hours where people really didn't know that he just declined to comply. That's actually a really big part of this entire case. It's not just that Peter Navarro is being sent to prison when Democrats aren't. It's the facts and the legal of how this all played out. So again, there is a huge difference between a political opinion versus understanding the substantive legal provisions. We as conservatives have to understand that, and we have to make our arguments based in the law and ensure that everyone has the same playing field. That's the hypocrisy that we need to target, not that conservatives need to be preferred and in our little siloed Republican versus Democrats that we can just say, well, we're for Peter Navarro because we're for him. We need to make sure we are always consistent with the Constitution and the rule of law. We'll be right back. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. Well, in one of the most ridiculous stories of the week, and it's so hard to pick because there are so many ridiculous stories coming from all of these woke leftists. It's really hard to actually break it down of which one do we want to talk about. But this one, I think, actually takes the cake. This comes from Washington Examiner. Washington Supreme Court rules prospective lawyers no longer have to pass the quote-unquote racist bar exam. On Monday, the left-leaning Washington Supreme Court filed a pair of orders approving quote-unquote alternative pathways for people to become lawyers, nixing the requirement to pass the universal bar exam. The court claimed that the test, quote, blocks marginalized groups from entering the practice of law, and that the bar has, quote, racism and classism written into the test itself. By doing so, the Evergreen State joined Oregon, the only other state to officially approve alternatives to the bar exam. The Bar Licensure Task Force, chaired by Washington Supreme Court Justice Raquel Montoya Lewis and Seattle University Law School Dean Anthony Varona, studied options to the traditional bar exam following a year of pandemic-related bar exam modifications. The task force concluded their analysis that the traditional bar exam, quote, disproportionately and unnecessarily blocks marginalized groups from entering the practice of law, and the traditional bar exam is at best minimally effective for ensuring competent lawyers. So, fellow lawyer Josh Hammer, who is the senior editor for Newsweek and host of the Josh Hammer Show, joins me now. So, Josh, both you and I took the bar exam, different states, but this is absolutely absurd that racism and classism is implicitly built into the bar. I mean, this is woke nonsense.
Unfortunately, Jenna, I'm hardly surprised. I guess I'm actually mildly surprised that there are only now 2 states, Washington State and Oregon, that have gone to this depth and have chosen to provide alternatives to the bar exam. Look, you've seen in many top-tier universities over the past 5-10 years that have eliminated requirement to take the SAT or the ACT or some other form of standardized testing as a necessary condition to gain admission there. I actually just saw that Yale University, which had done away with the SAT requirement, now they actually put it back in because they realized that it wasn't heading in a very good direction. Ultimately, what this very far left critical race theory tinged language that you just read, ultimately what this is getting at, which is the same thing that the SAT, ACT standardized testing is getting at, is America has a choice to make. There are 2 fundamental visions as to who we are and what we have to, or what we will be. On the one hand, you have the actual vision going back to the founding era, which is a vision essentially of meritocracy, which is that if you are learned, if you are studied, if you are deserving, if you have worked really hard to achieve something, then the institutions will select you and then you will achieve that. On the other hand, you have the opposite of meritocracy, which is modern day equity, which is where you essentially just divvy up the pot based on some sort of crass percentage or some sort of politicking. Typically speaking, these days, the wokesters will look at what percentage of the population is black, what percentage of the population is an illegal alien, is LGBT self-identifying, and they'll have to give that number of places, whether it's university or a corporate 500 boardroom. But America has to choose. And, we actually saw last summer in the affirmative action case, the cases out of Harvard and UNC Chapel Hill, Jenna, we actually saw those 2 dueling visions put out into the Supreme Court record. You had Clarence Thomas, who stood robustly in his concurring opinion for the founding vision, and then Ketanji Brown Jackson was espousing this modern, equitable, woke pablum. That's really what's going on here. I think that kind of dueling vision of America is what is happening here. It's obviously absurd. I mean, was the bar exam a fun thing to take? No, I actually really hated it, and I never want to do it again.
I had fun. Come on.
No, it's the most funny that you never want to do again, right?
Yeah, 100%. And, and it's not necessarily that the bar exam actually prepares you for lawyering. I mean, there was so much on the bar exam that I'll never use, and I didn't use when I was more substantively in practice. But the point is that you had to think like a lawyer. You had to go in and actually take a test that a lot of people fail, and that precludes them from representing a client's interest in front of a court. I mean, that's what power of attorney does. And that is a meritocracy that we want. I mean, imagine if surgeons didn't have to pass their boards and anybody, can just open up a shop and say, hey, I'll remove your appendix. I mean, that doesn't sound like a very good thing, but yet DEI and all of this nonsense is, and critical theory, as you rightly point out, is implicit in this language, is subverting so many of our professions. I mean, we look at the airlines and some of the problems that are now happening. What is the answer here to this woke nonsense when it seems like even the courts, including Ketanji Brown Jackson, are suggesting, hey, we just throw out the rule book and whatever?
Yeah, I'm really happy that you mentioned the airlines because I read a very troubling column from Dennis Prager back in late January, so that would have been a month and a half, almost 2 months ago at this point, where he basically said that he was going to stop flying United Airlines. And Dennis apparently prefers United Airlines. He's achieved gold, platinum, whatever the highest status is. That's his typical airline of choice. But he pronounced in this column in late January that he was going to stop flying, and the reason being that United Airlines announced that they were going to start picking their pilots, not based on who is a talented pilot, who is a competent pilot to get the plane off the ground and then land the plane safely, but rather they were going to pick and choose pilots based on what I just described, based on this intersectional worldview, whereas certain races and sexes and sexual orientations and national origins are given preferential treatment, ultimately trying to concoct a perfect mosaic that perfectly mirrors the American populace at large. Now, Dennis is right. As someone who travels a lot, I get on a lot of airplanes. I want to go with an airplane that I think is selecting pilots because they are trained and are going to get the plane up and down safely, and I will arrive at my destination. So I think that our side, Jenna, which is really kind of this side of civilizational sanity, that's really what we are, frankly. We're the forces of sanity against the forces of insanity, of civilizational arson, as I sometimes phrase it. What we have to do is just remind people that all we want is that if you are talented and you have worked hard and you deserve something, then you should get it over someone who has done none of the work but happens to check a certain identity politics box, and then they are necessarily given a perch. I think the American people are overall still commonsensical enough where one of those visions, if it's laid out in that straightforward of a dichotomy, when they are juxtaposed against one another, I think the American people overall are still commonsensical enough where the correct vision, the founding vision, is going to prevail. But we have to lay it out in that kind of explicit, stark terminology, because that's really what's going on here.
Absolutely. It can't just kind of be this esoteric philosophy that doesn't have grounding and roots in the tangible reality of the practical effects that are happening when you take critical theory and you apply it to things like surgeons and lawyers and airline pilots. I mean, everybody, I don't care what my surgeon looks like, what background they have. I don't care if it is the perfect mosaic of civilization or whatever. I care that they're competent. And competency generally matters to people who need services like the professions that we're describing. And so I think you're absolutely right, Josh Hammer. And I want to hold you over to the next segment because you have a really fascinating book that's coming out that we're going to pivot topics a little bit, but you're not going to want to miss. So we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. All right. Well, Josh Hammer still is my guest, who is a senior editor at Newsweek, host of the Josh Hammer Show. And Josh, you just do all kinds of things. I mean, I can't even keep up with everything you're accomplishing. And you even recently got married. So congratulations on that. And you also have a new book that is coming out, I think, early next year. What's the working title and the timeliness of this very important topic?
Well, Jenna, first and foremost, thank you for the congratulations on our nuptials. Yeah, we got married in December, so we're just a few months in now to our lifelong journey, and God is good ultimately. So thank God things are all going well over. Things are all going well over in a household Hammer, I guess you would say. So I did publicly announce that I have signed a book contract. So the book's not out yet, but put a mark on your calendar for early 2025. That is when it's going to be arriving on bookshelves into a bookstore near you. So the working title right now, and we might change it, but the title right now is Sinai and Civilization. And I think it would have been very easy, Jenna, after October 7th and just the eruption of global anti-Semitism. It would have been very easy to write kind of a straight foreign policy, the case for Israel, standing with Israel. That's not quite the book that I wanted to write, but I was motivated to write a book in the aftermath of not just what happened on October 7th, but really just seeing this 1930s Weimar Republic, Nazi-era anti-Semitism bursting out into the open, the likes of which I certainly have never experienced in my lifetime. I think it was time to really just get a definitive book out there, just trying to remind people, whether they are Jewish, whether they are Christian, whether they are conservative, whether they are moderate, hopefully, ideally, whether they are liberal. It's not an explicitly partisan book. Just trying to remind everyone that without the Jewish people, you don't actually have Western civilization, because without the Jewish people, you don't have Revelation at Mount Sinai. You don't have the Bible itself. You don't have the Hebrew scripture. Without Judaism, you don't have Christianity. And by definition, without Christianity, you obviously, by definition, do not have Western civilization. Even Leo Strauss, who was not a particularly devout man himself, he famously said that Western civilization is formed of this helix of sorts, this dual helix between reason and revelation, where you have the reason from the Greeks and the Romans, and then revelation from Sinai, from ultimately the Jewish tradition. So I want to write a book about how the Jewish people have been instrumental in the formation, the development of Western civilization. That's obviously going to entail a strong case for Jewish nationalism, Zionism, U.S.-Israel relations. We're going to get into all of that, ultimately calling for a Jewish-Christian alliance to defeat Islamism and wokeism, because I think that alliance alone can ultimately save Western civilization. But without the Jews, you don't ultimately have Western civilization. That's the argument in the book.
Well, I absolutely agree with that argument, Josh Hammer, because that's the reason that we call America being founded and premised and grounded in the Judeo-Christian worldview, because you're absolutely right that without Judaism, you wouldn't have Christianity. And if we look at the entire context of the 66 books of the Bible, this is the truth as revealed by God in Scripture, special revelation, and then we also have general revelation, which is the laws of nature and of nature's God, everything around us, as our founders so beautifully wrote in the Declaration. And so this seems to be an apologetic on Western civilization, and not just this call, because I think that a lot of conservatives have wrongly sort of divorced the Judeo-Christian ethic from the principles of conservatism that they choose to advance. And I've started calling this kind of moral gerrymandering, where it's like they want to say taxation is theft. They want to say, get off my lawn. They want to say we have freedom and liberty, but they're not substantively defining the moral grounding of how we define and derive those values. So I think this is going to be very important. And what do you want to encourage the overall conservative movement to adhere to moving forward?
Look, Jenna, if I had my druthers, if there was one thing that I could snap my fingers, and I think that this is the thing that, more than anything else, I would take that as the means with which to save America. I think that a spiritual or religious great awakening really is the number one thing that we should hope for and indeed pray for. But, more generally speaking, look, I mean, people can say that that America was founded on religious freedom, and it obviously was. I'm of a minority faith, the Jewish faith myself there. But America was obviously founded with a very, very, very heavy biblical inheritance. Our founders quoted scripture all the time. And yes, they were quoting Enlightenment figures like John Locke. Thomas Jefferson is, of course, paraphrasing Locke in the Declaration. But they were really quoting God, Bible, and scripture even more than that. If you look at the founding era commentary, that's really who they were quoting. And again, I think taking it a step further and asking, where is all this coming from? Well, we inherited the English common law from England. And frankly, a lot of the English common lawyers were citing the Hebrew scriptures themselves. In fact, there's actually a somewhat obscure English common lawyer named John Selden, who was not Jewish himself. He was Christian, but he was an expert in the Talmud, actually, which is really fascinating. He actually incorporated Talmudic legal concepts into his common law jurisprudence. So I want to get into all of this in the book and really just try to explore for the readers the role that Judaism and Jewish thought and the Hebrew scriptures have played in the development of all of this and all of what we call Western civilization today. And then we'll have a lot of chapters for sure on contemporary stuff post-October 7th. Here is why the U.S. relationship with Israel is important. I'm going to spell that all out very clearly for the readers as well there. But again, the final call there, the final call when this book comes out, God willing, in a year or a little under a year from now, the final call is really calling for this Jewish-Christian alliance, which from my vantage point alone is the only alliance that can possibly preserve Western civilization, because without Judaism and Christianity, you do not have Western civilization. And that authentic Bible-based religion alone is what is capable, I think, of filling the void that is left by wokeism and illiberalism, and that alone can defeat Islamism and wokeism as well.
Yeah, so well said. And we see a lot of this history that is embedded even in some of our monuments and some other things that, of course, the left would love to tear down, like the statues of Jefferson. But even looking at the lawgivers or the fathers of the law on the stone around the Supreme Court building. I mean, and even internally, all of those things, Moses is one of them, right? Because of the 10 Commandments. And we look back to history and understand that truth is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And the measurable difference between right and wrong, good and evil, as C.S. Lewis put it, is understanding that the truth doesn't change. And so in this apologetic, I wrote something a little like similar to this, not focused so much on the history of Judaism, which I'm really looking forward to reading, Josh Hammer. But my book that came out in 2015, it's called The Legal Basis for a Moral Constitution, and tracing those same roots back to the Judeo-Christian worldview and why we have a constitution that separates and limits powers to the government and understands that rights like religious liberty and the right to not be compelled to believe in one religion or another actually comes from Christianity, comes from the Bible. God doesn't compel us. So all of these things are so incredibly important. So we will really look forward to reading this book. And where can people find you so that they can follow when your book comes out?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jenna, as always. So I'm on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it these days, at Josh_Hammer, Instagram, Josh B. Hammer. I write a syndicated column that goes up in Newsweek where I work, as well as a bunch of other right-of-center publications. Then I host two shows, The Josh Hammer Show and America on Trial with Josh Hammer, both wherever you get your podcasts.
See, Josh is just doing way too much. He always compels me to do more. But that's all the time we have for Jenna Ellis tonight. You can reach me and my team, Jenna, at salemnewschannel.com.